title here, and today the panelists are myself, Suzanne Lunsford, and Nagib. And what I suggested was that since Nagib really wanted to talk about methodologies, and I wasn't exactly sure what his precise meaning was, I thought we might start with him explaining what he's looking for in this panel and what he's interested in discussing, and then we'll just have the discussion.
The point is, in the last 5 years, or 6, yes. I'm not sure, or 7, Professor Lunsford brought paper here that relate research, education, and real
world experiences with industry, academia
exactly.
working with industry.
And she did that in the hard science of chemistry. And she's been 7 years doing that. It was not just once she did it, but once and again and again and again. So some people we thought, it's not just my thinking, okay, that someone should do a case study of what she's doing, case by case, because she's publishing in the same way any professor would publish, which is somehow different than a written case study. So we thought it's just an idea, maybe it's not feasible, that if we can somehow see what she was doing and she's still doing in chemistry, take it, to case study, or at least case report. With all these cases, we can see the commonality among them. And then we can start identifying and designing an initial methodology of how we can integrate research, education, and consulting or real life problem solving. And if we can do that in our discipline, we can do it in your discipline and yours and mine. In my discipline, software engineering and information system development, I had the experience for 30 years that these kind of things work. But maybe it's my experience, it worked for me, but would not work for anyone else. But at the case, I have 2 personal anecdotes that I need to share with you, because they are examples of what could happen. When I was studying my PhD about 4 years ago, I worked with my advisor in the CDC in Houston. So our group had an effectiveness of 76%, 75%. The effectiveness was measured as follows: how the quantity of line of codes that get in use divided by the total of line of codes that were programmed. So it's a measure of effectiveness, not efficiency. Because it's not how many power, how many person power, how many money. It's not efficiency, it's effectiveness. So I was so glad, about that. When I went back to my country, my surprise that I went to 3%. So I thought that maybe it's the problem that I made. So I got another one. My effectiveness went to 2%. So there was two options, because it was the same person, not another person, you see, with the same methodology. At the time, were structured, the structured methodology and all the flow diagrams and all that things of the 70s, the 80s. So one option was I got a mission. Because it's the same person, it's not another person. So in 1 year, I am not good anymore. And another option was the methodology that is effective in the American business culture is not effective in the Venezuelan or Latin American business culture. So we started working with that hypothesis. And after 10 years in the university with students, and after that another 25 years in our consulting firm, we achieved 80% of effectiveness. And we've been 27 years signing contract of 100% of effectiveness. So it's not just academic statistics. We are signing contract of 100%. You know why? Because I know that it's 80%. And the 20% I apply it, to increasing the amount of the contract. That's it. So we've been 27 years telling people, telling the clients, no matter what you ask, no matter how many lines of code we make, we're gonna charge you just for the line of code you use, even if your people ask for the line, for a requirement and it's not using anymore. Because we are covered legally because the contract, they signed the requirement, but we are not covered professionally, because professionally we are not doing well, even if legally we are covered. So it's not just academic statistics, it's reality. 27 years we've been like that. But we started with 3 and 2% of effectiveness, and we went up in 10 years to 80% of effectiveness. And that's in software engineering, which is hard science, and information system development, which is hard and soft science at the same time. So the first phase I can see is to make case study of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And try to abstract a method or methodology that can be applied in the American academy. And after that, try to get into a systemic methodology rather than systematic. Now I'm going to explain that. And try to adapt it to Mexico, to Vietnam, to Russia, to other places, about how you can relate if cybernetics is better, but at least relate research, education, and real life problem solving, because she's doing that in chemistry.
And possibly when we look at the other international versus the United States, how do we assess those programs as well?
And I am sure that with case study can be done. I am sure that with case study can be done. Because what we applied in Venezuela was an informal case report, not study. It was informal because it was not written. But the 120% of the academic project we have at the another 200 in the consulting firm, we used to have what is called post-mortem of the project. And with this post-mortem of the project, we kept changing dynamically the methodology that we were applying, and kept improving and improving and improving and improving. So I lived there for 27 years. So I'm telling you, why you don't do that? especially in the field so important for the universities and for the industry, because it relates the university with the industry. If we can get, because a lot of people are relating them, but I didn't see up to a present a kind of method or methodology that can help people how to do it.
And I think to get a methodology, we could also possibly all of us come together and maybe write a grant for like an NSF funding.
Now he asked me to explain what the meaning of methodology. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree because he doesn't agree with me. But to transmit the idea, just I have to give you the meaning. You don't have to agree, okay, with the meaning. Method comes from methodos from Greek, which means a way that connects villages in the old Greece. That's the first time that the methodos was used as a geographical way. Then the Greeks, especially Aristotle, used the word in a metaphorical sense as a mental way to do things. So, what is the essence of a method? A point, the parting point at a final point. The village that I initiate, the method, and when I am arriving. So it's 1 point, 1 and 1 point. This is the essence of the method. But now the method not is the way that needs someone to walk it or to drive in highway. And that's mean a transportation means a car, the tool. And that's mean someone got to have the technique to drive the car. This is technique. So techniques, tools, and methods are completely different and completely related. There is no method with no techniques and no tools. But they conceptually are completely different. The tool is an objective thing. The technology is how you manage the tool, how you drive the car. The methodology, I mean, the technology. And the methodology is the network of highway with a lot of car and bicycle and people driving them. This is methodology that can take us not from one point to another, but from several points to a lot of other points. And you can choose what method to take, what highway to take, in case there is traffic here, you go the other way, etc., 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 etc. So at the nodes, what we found out is better to have expert system, micro expert system, connecting the method. All the experience that you can get is an if-then experience. If such and such, and you are in this node, don't take this method, take this method. We also wanted to do that, by experts, micro expert system, but we didn't have the money to do it. So we did it not by computing, we did it by our mind and our hands. Because we didn't have the money to do it as a computer thing. So some people, especially in Venezuela, they confuse methodology at the city with the network of methods and highway and roadway. They confuse that with the map of the city. So when they are talking about methodology, they are talking about maps. And this is not the methodology. This is the map of the methodology. The methodology requires real highway methods, real tools the cars. Real people with the technology to drive the tool, to use the tool, which is the ability to drive a car. This is the organic view of a methodology, not the systematic methodology, but the systemic one. That doesn't mean that the systemic methodology would not allow inside herself, inside itself, systematic ones. Actually, the American methodology at the time, the structure analysis, the structure design, etc., etc., all of them were part of the systemic methodology that we were using. Let me give you another anecdote to see why sometimes things happen in a country effectively and the other country would not happen. One man was appointed president of Venezuela, which is the largest company in Venezuela of aluminum company. He was a friend of mine. He called me, I worked for him, de bono, as professor. And he said, I know nothing about that, please send me. I started applying, the DFD, the flow diagram, the data flow diagrams. Usually in that case, top down. The top down was the basic, not now, but in the 80s was, what everyone knows, top down. So the top was him. I was glad that I had access to the top. After half an hour, he was honest with me and told me, hey, I know nothing about what you're asking me. I was just appointed. Talked with my directors, the people reporting me. I started talking with them. I found out that about half of them were also new. And the other half that were not new, they were hiding me information because they feared to be fired. So I would have to go down and down and down. I ended up with blue collar and secretaries. I swear to God. So how you can apply top down if you are in the bottom? You need bottom up. Which Jordan said at the time, this is the prehistoric tool of computers, bottom up. So I had to use the prehistoric, the called prehistoric, bottom up, in order to get to the up, and then go with the top down. So we used the top down, but thanks to the bottom up, we were able to use the top down that was used in the States. So all the technology and the method and methodology that were used in the States were included in our methodology, but something else we did in order to be able to apply the methodology that it was effective in the American business culture, that was not effective. For example, another example, here in the state, when someone signed the requirements, is signing not just, he's signing his responsibility, not just from the legal point of view, but from the professional point of view. In Venezuela, when one is signing from the legal point of view, and he wouldn't care if that is okay or not. So anyone would sign without reading. It's another culture. So that of signing would not work in Venezuela. It works. If you want to cover yourself legally, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be effective as professionals. You see what I mean? So if she wants, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong with all that, if she wants to take that not just as a methodology here in the state, but as I think she was thinking to take it out of the state,
Right.
she necessarily need to face the problem of different cultures.
Right, like Canada, what we're talking about, the engineering. She teaches engineering in Canada, so that would be a very good curriculum. He teaches marketing in Mexico, very good right programs.
I'm sure that the case studies would solve not just her problem, but would provide support to many universities trying to relate to the industry.
Okay, well, thanks for clearing that up. Now we're halfway through the conversational session, at any rate, I would say, I mean, from my own perspective, as you know, as we talk about case studies, certainly there are a lot of things that case studies could be used for, and here we're outside of the domain, perhaps, of discussion cases, and we're starting to move into things like example cases, which I think is more along the lines of what you're talking about. Discussion cases are designed to develop, critical thinking skills. There's not a right answer, and in the case of example cases, what we're trying to do is, convey concrete knowledge in a way, cause and effect that is useful. Now, I can say that I've seen a certain amount of interest on a number of occasions. The United Nations Staff College has used me to work with to try to teach them how to write cases, because one of the biggest problems they have, and it sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like this is also a challenge that you face, is that a lot of knowledge that's picked up along the way in dealing with specific situations is lost. And so, how many of these implementations have you done?
Well, I think the other thing is with your case studies, you don't have an exact answer.
Well, no, that's
my
right.
case studies, I have to have an exact answer because it's science and it has to be, to a certain extent, they created an electrode. I mean, we can do comparison case studies, as you were talking about this morning, but there might be comparative studies, but then finally, what is the best sensor you made and why is it the best? And then what types of instrumentation would you utilize, and then you have to back it up that way. But once they get down to that, there would be one correct answer in the whole process.
Right. Well, first off, I guess, thinking about this from a case design point of view, when I was dealing with the United Nations, what they wanted to do, they were not so interested in discussion cases, though that would possibly be part of their training, but they were interested in writing case studies as a way of capturing information that was lost by the organization. Now, one of the things I wasn't entirely sure about with respect to this particular session is whether who the targeted audience for these case studies is. Are we talking about faculty members who might employ this in their own classrooms? Are we talking about case studies specifically intended for students as undergraduates as a problem-solving situation? Are we talking, about case studies specifically for capturing knowledge that might be relevant to practice? And since you designed the section, you might have a better idea.
I'm talking about undergraduate.
Okay, so we're talking
That's the starting point.
Yes, it starts with
Yeah.
yes.
Because for graduate, the idea would be a lot better.
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about now creating case studies for undergraduates, specifically in the sciences. So,
Case study with the idea of having a methodology of linking the university, education, research, and consulting.
but
With that in mind, which is different than any case study.
well, but I guess now as I try to understand this, I'm not sure that we're all talking about the same thing. In fact, I'm pretty sure we're not. But because Suzanne, as I understand it, you're talking about case studies that undergraduates can use, to learn different techniques. Is that?
That's true.
That's now.
But using a methodology, if we
Not just
create
that.
these case
Not
studies,
just that.
then we can use it towards other curriculum.
Not just that. She is also relating research with education and with real life problem solving.
Yeah.
And she's doing that in chemistry. So the idea is to start with chemistry, but not to forget that it's not just for chemistry.
Okay? So why don't you talk a little bit about the nature of these case studies so we can get a clear sense, then we can open it up for questions.
Okay, well, some of the case studies that I have created has really encouraged our students to collaborate with industrial settings. And so, for instance, one of them is where I'll be talking about looking at the aggregate industry and how the aggregate industry is an essential part of geology and chemistry and engineering aspects, so that they will actually get projects like, for instance, creating a sensor for water quality, or creating a sensor for looking at the pore size of the aggregate that you're looking at. So that's kind of the types of modules I've created, and then within those modules that I've created that like he said, could be case studies, is looking at different instrumentation, because today Grandon was talking about how do we create a case study that makes them kind of think about what they're learning as they're processing, but in science we would give them different types of instrumentation choices. So once they create their sensor, they'd have to look at scanning electron microscopy, from tunneling electron microscopy to different types of FTIR, Fourier transform infrared, different technologies. So they would have to come up with different technologies, different types of spectroscopy, and determine what was the best spectroscopy technique once they create their sensor. Now, of course, there could be different answers, Grandon, if they come up with using a different type of sensor, say they have different choices and they use different parameters, you could get possibly 2 answers or 3 answers sometimes, depending on the type of sensor. But the ones I've used have usually have one answer because it's undergrads, and we don't want them to not lose focus on the project that they're doing. But working with industry is vital, and the way I do that is I actually go into industry, and they actually, for instance, right now I have a student coming up with, this is something I haven't written about yet, but I'd eventually want to publish it with your conference, is working on looking at how to create a paving surface that can be utilized in the garage industry. And in that, he's actually taking on recycled granite, and he's using chemistry reactions to create a particle size that he can actually coat driveways or coat your garage. So it's an actual aggregate industry application, and we're working with industry to do that, to see about stability, tensile strength, and all those items. So looking at all of you guys, I know all of you are not chemists, I understand that, but like for instance, even if you're marketing or your business or you're into education, we all could come together looking at how to build case studies and a methodology technique, and come up with a way that possibly we could get National Science Foundation funding if we could all come together, maybe if I start writing an Nsf Grant. And then obviously we all meet here at this conference, that would be a good way to continue the conference process as we start building and studying these methodologies, how we're building these case studies. And I wondered if anybody might have an interest, since I don't want to do all the talking, because obviously you're here to get something out of the conference. I thought that might be a good way for all of us to come together and come back with something for our own classrooms, so we can help undergraduates learn, critique them and learn and problem solve, but in the process also in different fields, just not science.
I might speak some heresy here for a minute.
Okay.
Someone that actually has worked in pharmaceutical research as well as other research as well as education. Chemistry, and again, this is heresy, but chemistry is for the general public and for a broad spectrum reach to an undergraduate community broader than just the chemistry. Being able to span something that's more approachable to a broader audience. And again, I'm not necessarily recommending what I'm saying, I'm just saying this by way of illustration. There's a strong trend right now in medical research where you have colleges of medicines that are doing education, they're having research, but they're adding that third leg to the triad, getting that research translational into clinical, practical application. And so there, you have, everyone goes to a doctor, everyone gets medical research. You're looking for something multicultural. Virtually every developed country in the world that has a strong education system has a medical system that complements it. And so that again can move out, including areas that don't. Germany is well regarded for their chemistry capabilities. Venezuela, maybe not so much, but they still have doctors. People who are going through educational programs, undergraduate students that understand that relationship. So you may want to look at some organizations, USF College of Medicine is doing going with the University of Kentucky, who's doing putting together translations. And the translation is to take that research happening in universities where it has an education component and translating that to practical real-world application in the hands of the clinicians. So I'm just saying, you might want to consider an alternate discipline other than chemistry that has a broader
Yes,
spectrum.
that's the point. I need to make a clarification. I'm talking about the Venezuela of 4 years ago. I'm not talking about the Venezuela in the last 17 years. So in the Venezuela of the last 17 years, all what I said would not work. Because there is a lot of other variables that are not academic variables, okay? So, listening to him, I would suggest a suggestion. Two things. One of them is to try to go to the format where you're doing and as low as possible to remove the content, the form. And then the suggestion is, again, it worked for me, that doesn't mean that it worked for you.
Right.
To start not with the syllabus, to start with the industrial problem, and then to see how I can adapt the syllabus, my teaching, to this problem. I was appointed 2 years as chair of the department in operational research. I accepted with one condition, to allow me to get the people to register and, in the master degree with the necessary condition of saying which problem they are going to solve from industry. And then to adapt all the subject they're gonna receive to this problem, which is the inverse way to the tradition that you learn a bunch of courses. Now, let's see with your dissertation or with your project, let's see if you can apply that to a real life problem. So it's completely the inverse situation. And it's harmonized with what you say is to start, because I'm sure that implicitly you are doing that implicitly. So to make it explicit, to start with the problem in the industry and then to adapt all your course to solve this problem. So the education is oriented to a real life problem, and the research you need to do is oriented to the real life problem, which is completely the opposite of what we are doing now.
And again, I work in an area considerably downstream from what Dr. Lunsford works in working countering weapons of mass destruction, building partnership capability and capacity with partner nations in the Middle East. And again, fascinating conversations on, I love the analogy with the car, the highway network, and all of that. Because again, one of the challenges that we have when we go over there and engage is that we engage with a map sometimes. And again, when we're passing along, say using chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear detection, primarily the chemical detection capabilities, we use everything from the primitive with little wet chemistry types of techniques up to ion spectroscopy to Fourier transform, infrared spectroscopy, all the way through liquid chromatograph and gas chromatograph techniques. But in transferring those skills over to a culture that is so different from ours, and getting them to understand when you're applying U.S. robust authorities and funding lines to develop those capabilities, that when that nation has to self-sustain those capabilities down the road, that becomes a much more difficult thing. And you've got aspects of the equipment, so maintaining the equipment, maintaining the human capital, those types of things. So I think, again, some of the work that you're doing is right on target in that reaching out to industry, and that perhaps even in my very niche Department of Defense mission space, I'm a benefactor of some of those types of research and those case studies.
I just had an idea about thinking about your grant funding with an interdisciplinary approach, because you seem to have the industry knowledge already of what's the need. And so the chemistry, the college, the Department of Chemistry is meeting a certain need. What about marketing coming alongside with the project and looking at the same, now how do we market this? Once we produce it, how do we market this? Maybe another group coming in, I can't think of anything off, but you understand what I'm saying? Like our undergrad, the case study could be the interdisciplinary work of undergrads coming together, working from an industry, from that first, like first it influences the syllabus or the study, and then you have the students participate in making that happen, or meeting the need of the industry.
And if possible, with your boss, to make students participate in the design of the syllabus.
Yeah.
To do that, they need to know first what is the problem they're gonna solve.
Right.
I'm not sure if your boss will allow you to do that.
One comment, that I would make, I've got, two different examples of what we're trying to do to put these things in action. And of course, those people who are from the USF DBA program already know that basically the whole philosophy of the DBA program is it's easier to teach research methods to people who've got problems to solve than to take people who know research methods and have them go out and find interesting problems. Because the folks who are totally focused on research methods are principally interested in publishing papers, because that's how you build your academic reputation, and real-world problems tend to be messy. And so in our DBA program, we basically have people who are working in industry who have lots and lots of interesting issues, and we're saying, okay, we're going to keep feeding you research methods until you find one that actually is a good fit with the specific problems that you're interested in, and then this would, this is, the hope is that, hey, maybe some publications will come out of it, maybe it'll just be interesting projects, but we hope that there will be a value added to applying research to these problems. Now, the other thing I was going to just mention is this is something that we have, that actually we submitted an Nsf Grant Proposal back in October. We probably won't hear about it till May. I have no idea whether it will succeed or not, because, like, the best you can hope for with the National Science Foundation is maybe 1 in 10 odds, so it's always a long shot. But they had a specific program for involving high school teachers in research, and the idea is if you teach high school teachers research methods, then they'll be able to bring those back to the classroom. And this is a pretty big funding program that they have. Now, what we proposed was a little bit different. What we proposed is basically teaching high school teachers how to write case studies in STEM subjects, particularly information systems, our area, and having them go out and write case studies over the course of the summer, and at the end they bring the cases together and discuss them. And the idea would be that right now you've got a lot of high school teachers teaching computer science who have never programmed for a living, who really don't understand the types of problems you run into information systems, and they're really incapable of introducing to their pupils, their students, any idea of what it would be like to actually work in the computer industry. So there's a strong perception that in the computer industry, you're going to be off on yourself eating mountains of Twinkies. Well, the mountains of Twinkies are in fact real. I was in a Microsoft and I saw a mountain of Twinkies, but that it's a totally solitary activity that could only be pursued by nerds. Well, frankly, if you've got programmers who do not communicate with each other, that's not a good sign for the nature of the program you're building, but none of these folks have seen the process in action. So what our hope is that by getting high school teachers out into the field, dealing with the actual decisions that technology people have to make, they would come back and be able to be more effective in the classroom. So this is an example of what we were trying to do with cases. Yes, Anne.
Okay, listen to you. I would say, do we intend to motivate, to do something to motivate students, or let's say high school students, to teach or to learn computer science, or we want to solve with computer science students real life problems? Two different directions.
In my experience, we didn't have problem motivating the students. In my experience.
Okay, so
We had problem motivating our bosses to allow us to do it.
yeah. So if we want to motivate it, this is one thing. But if we want to integrate computer science students to solve real problems, is a little bit more complicated in the sense that we have to find some methods. And I'm coming from Germany, from University of Applied Science in Munich, and we do believe that we are on the way to solve these problems as much as possible. So we impose, but I am not the only one. I guess the Austrian do the same thing, and probably some other countries. So we obligate our students to do at least one semester within the industry. And that is one point. The second point is we obligate them, they have to make a colloquium afterwards and tell us what they learned. Being there, they learn what the real life problems are. And by the end, the majority end up in doing their thesis in combination with the companies. We also animate some engineers, experts from the companies to give some lectures at our university and bring them case studies. And in that case, the students, also the ones who do not go to the company to do their thesis, they are confronted with this kind of problems. And I do believe at the end, they are very happy that they may end up working for one of these companies where they did the thesis, working on a problem, a real life problem. And the last one is that we, as a professor, we learn from them what the real life problems are. And if a student comes to us and explains what he did, we learn what the up-to-date situations in one of the area which we are teaching.
Yeah, the important thing about what he's saying, in my opinion, the way I see it, is to do that, but without confusing the means with the ends. What are the ends? To show the student that he can apply or she can apply the subject that he was taught and the syllabus he was taught, and everything else is the mean, or the end is to solve an external problem, a real life problem, and then the mean is the syllabus. So it's a matter of applying, the systemic logic of ends and means, and not confuse the ends with the means. So what are our ends and what are the means? Because the means could be ends and the end could be means. So not to get confused about what's the end and what's the mean. All of that would work if
Or maybe you just don't worry about it so much, because one of the characteristics of complex problems is the ends and means are often so interdependent that you can't really you cannot really distinguish them.
My point is, which is the starting point, the end of the mean. And then after that, they are cybernetically related.
But I actually worked with PhD students at the University of Osnabrück, and I was extremely impressed by the way the German system integrates practice with academia. And one of the things that I found a little bit distressing in their PhD program is they were interested in becoming more like us. And I kept saying, no, don't do that. But why don't we open it up for other comments about this?
Just kind of a background note for anyone who's actually interested in pursuing more of this. Dr. Eric, I think it's Mazer from Harvard University. He's
The physicist, yeah.
He's done a lot of work in this. He has a published paper on the scientific approach to teaching research as a basis for course design. I've sat through his lectures. They're all very interesting. He shows that, like, your traditional lecture of 80 kids sitting in a classroom and the professor just talking at them, people hooked them up with like brain scans and everything, and they had the same brain scans as people looking at watching television.
Yeah,
So
they saw that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a good background information if you're going to move forward and actually trying to push an idea to change the standard teaching.
I'm really out of my element, but as I'm listening to what you're talking about, I'm wondering if there are principles from vertical integration in business where you're trying to reach further in to have a better, it's a bottom line in business, but I'm wondering if there are principles in that behavior that could be applied to help you with what I think you're saying is really integrating much more of the outcome into the actual process itself. I don't know if there's much research on, vertical integration looking at,
Well, and that is, in a sense, too often within our educational system, we take a little component piece, we call it a problem, and the students and often the teachers have no sense as to how this fits into what you're actually solving. When I was in the 10th grade, I went over to England, and the mathematics they were teaching me was so strange. There were these diagrams of mappings and stuff like that, and I was used to algebra I was taught in the United States, and I could not figure out, what relationship this had to anything. It wasn't until I was in second semester linear algebra at Harvard that I actually ever saw those diagrams again. But part of the problem in England was nobody told me why this was going to be useful. They just taught the technique. So it was nice to encounter. It was nice to encounter it later on. But if I hadn't gone on in math, I never would have discovered that. And a lot of our education basically takes this isolated approach and doesn't give you a clear sense of where it fits into the vertical scheme. Yeah, you learn this, and then you'll be able to do this, and then you'll be able to do this, and this is how it will apply in the workforce, or this is how it would apply in an academic career. And very often you don't get the big picture. This is one of the things that case studies can potentially do for you, because essentially, the case study, if it's an example case that explains how a particular problem was solved and where techniques fit into that solution. In the case of a discussion case, it gives you a problem to solve, and then you discuss it, and you start to understand how the little pieces fit together. The best experience that you could possibly get is, of course, going out and encountering the problem in the field and working through it. But that type of experience is very expensive, and you can only get a limited number of them because it takes a lot of time to solve them. And I think there's tremendous benefit to that, but there's also benefit of basically compressing the experience using something like a case study device, because that gives you at least the opportunity to simulate a particular problem in your mind and interact with others. So I think that there's potential benefit.
And again, I see that a lot because a lot of the folks that I engage with are kind of, they're victims of some of the former European colonialism. And as a result, if we go there and try to increase some efficiencies with them, some of those vertical things and our real reluctance, especially within the human resource management and the training domains, to change, there's a whole lot of resistance. So as you come in with methodologies and realize, oh, by the way, other people are also engaging with them, to not compete so much, but to offer them some techniques that can actually leverage them forward, and especially as you work, the research outreach to business. I think that's incredibly important to at least think that one, at least in the background, because that really does affect business models, because again, within businesses, you've got to allocate HRM and training resources when something new comes along, or else it's not going to be retained. And that's been a huge challenge for us.
Both of you brought an important question that probably all of us will know about it, but I need to repeat it. Efficiency and effectiveness of the education. The education is a dynamic system, and as any dynamic system, if you can apply the variety, the requisite variety of Ashby's law, that you need as much variety in the system as it is outside in order to adapt. So if you need to be in order to be effective, you have to adapt. So if you are in a dynamic system with a changing environment, you need to be adapting in order to be effective. But the cost of this adaptiveness is efficiency. You have to lower your efficiency. So as long as the educational system is oriented implicitly to efficiency, it's not going to be easy to orient it to effectiveness, because in dynamic system, this is a law. If you go more efficiency, it's because less effectiveness, and vice versa, more effectiveness requires less efficiency. So if we, at the beginning of any case method or any methodology that you can do, I think, in my opinion, you should make that extremely clear and explicit.
Yeah, I think that is I think it's a very important point, and it's something it's very challenging, to those of us who use case studies a lot, because a lot of our educational system is driven by the amount of content you convey. We don't actually measure the amount of content that is actually absorbed and retained very well, but we definitely measure the amount that is conveyed. And you see this, in the K-12 system in the United States, teachers are judged by how many of the points they cover, not by whether or not the students actually understand them. One of the challenges that you have using case studies is it is often very, very difficult to know what learning has actually taken place from the case study, because it's not something that's easily testable. I use discussion cases, and in discussion cases what we're trying to do is improve judgment. But how do you measure someone's judgment as improved as a result of the course? We don't have any good measures. Earlier today I showed a diagram giving students assessment of their own learning in different areas as a result of using case studies. That particular diagram was done in a comparison of online versus face-to-face cases. But the fact is, it doesn't matter what it was used for. The fact I got 6 dimensions, and the best I could come up with was student self-reports. Does it make me a better communicator? Does it inform me about technologies? Does it give me a better sense of real-world situations? And I have been, for years, trying to figure out ways that I could test that type of thing reliably.
That's what I was worried about, assessment. How do I, once I implement those cases, how do I assess them? Because when I do inquiry-based learning with these FTIR, Raman spectrometry, these different techniques, I can do an inquiry-based assessment of creating those tests. However, how do we assess this, case studies? And so that's another thing I have to worry about when I get to that point where I lower students really lack is, in the undergraduate level, my experience is they don't always get the real world experience, and so that's what I'm trying to do, so that when they go into the field, that they're not lost, and they really do know the advantages and the disadvantages of the different technology that they will be implementing, so they're not wasting their boss's time and the hours added up to train them on the instrumentation, but so that they can be better qualified to make their own problem solving and their action-based decisions upon the project, so they know when they're testing something that's highly corrosive or something that's highly reactive, what instrumentation is best for those processes. And when they're doing organic and inorganic analysis, do they really need to use an organic FTI versus Raman they would use for more their inorganic? So those types of things, how do we really implement that? And so what I'm looking for also, I want to hear about your NSF for high school teachers, because I do run a workshop, and I'll be giving a talk later about my high school teachers, what I've been doing, working with OAIMA, the Ohio Aggregate Industrial Mineral Association. And they have gotten funding through the state, but if there's some type of National Science Foundation or some type of foundation that you guys know about that can really help our students in Ohio, I'd be really happy to hear about that, because funding's getting tight on my grant, and it will probably be running out next year, so I'm looking for funding. And I promise you I'll do a good job and assess the program if you know of any possible place to send me, and maybe we can even collaborate on a project together. That's the thing. And then maybe also within that grant writing, we could pull into the thing about the international conference that we present at the international conference, and that we collaborate with other scientists and other educators and other industry, what we're doing, the successes if we get grant funding, to continue the process so we can bring more people on board to really enhance our content around not just the United States but throughout the world.
Yes. I was gonna interrupt you because of that. She really needs people from out of the state interested in contributing with that, because the grant is requiring that. And I agree that the grant would require that, because all what I told you, about, things are not the same, methodologies in the state are not necessarily the same as in Japan or Venezuela or whatever, you see. So, being this multinational conference, let's say, she thought, and I thought, and probably you thought,
I'm tired to think at this point.
that this is probably the best forum, is a multidisciplinary forum and multinational